Hello, this is Jeff Vanderstelt, Executive Director of Saturate and host of the Saturate podcast. Saturate exists to serve and equip leaders to start and strengthen unified gospel city movements that lead to gospel saturation, to the end that every woman, man, and child has repeated opportunities to meet Jesus through his church on mission everywhere and every day. Now, we believe this will require, as Jesus prayed in John 17, that the church is deeply connected to Jesus, to the Father, to the Spirit, and is collectively unified together in a region working around 5 key initiatives that we see as a repeated pattern in the life and ministry of the Apostle Paul. And that is that there's a movement of prayer, and especially a listening prayer, a posture to be attentive to the voice of God, to the direction of Jesus, to the Spirit's leading. So that's the first one, that we are really attending to God in prayer, waiting on him so he'll show us what to do and how to do it. Second, that we're devoted together to making disciples who make disciples. Third, that we're seeing the church get strengthened through emotional health, through leaders leading from a place of relational, emotional, spiritual health, and of course creating a culture of that because it comes out of their own life. Then fourth, then we want to see churches working together to serve their city, to bring kingdom good wherever they're at. And then lastly, we believe we need to see more and more of these kinds of churches and kingdom expressions started. And that could look like new churches, new nonprofits, or new businesses that all desire to live out these previous 4 initiatives. So now, on this particular episode, we're going to spend some time on a mixture of both disciple making coupled with emotional health. And more specifically, we're going to be interacting with Michel Hendricks. Before I tell you a little bit more about who he is, I was introduced to Michel through his book that we'll talk a little bit about, I'm sure, because I got introduced to him through Jim Wilder, who wrote the book Renovated. Then they did a book together called The Other Half of Church. And we'll talk about what that is. But Michel's a teacher, a trainer, an inventor, an author. He's drawing from a cross-section of Bible and brain science. I think you actually refer to yourself as a neurotheologian, I think. Or maybe is that Jim? Is that Jim that calls himself that?
More Jim than I.
That's more Jim than you. Okay. But you help churches, he helps churches and communities implement a relational discipleship that's more transformative. He directs the Consulting at Life Model Works. He's also, like I said, a co-author of the book, The Other Half of Church. He did that with Dr. Jim Wilder. And then you've written Overcoming, I guess that's the Overcoming Spiritual Stagnation is the subtitle, isn't it, of that? Yep. You've graduated from University of Colorado in Boulder and Denver Seminary. So do you live there, by the way? Is that where you're at?
Yeah, we live in Boulder right now.
Okay, you are spoiled.
It is. It's a beautiful place.
I'll tell you. Yeah. Well, Michel, I'm really glad you're here. And, before we started, I told you you've had an impact on me. Your writing has, your work has. Both you and Jim have been a beautiful gift to me personally. But without you even knowing it before we got on, this call, you have impacted thousands of people through me because of the way that I've really tried to carry a lot of things you've taught and written and are doing and bring it to a lot of people. So I just want to, first of all, publicly thank you for your impact, that even though we didn't even know each other until we just met, you have been from afar a mentor and a teacher to me. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And that's very encouraging.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? On the personal side, who you are and how you ended up in the space that you're in. And it's a pretty remarkable space that I think is desperately needed for the church right now.
Yeah, my spiritual path has been an interesting one. I didn't really grow up in a Christian family, almost never went to church growing up. I say almost. I had a grandma in Nebraska.
Okay.
That every time we would visit, she would make us go to church when we were young kids. And it was in an old Presbyterian church. And the only thing I really remember from that is how, for me, let's say an 8-year-old, whatever age I was, how boring it was to an 8-year-old. right? Just sitting there, having all this energy.
Oh,
My
man.
grandpa's home. He's probably fishing. He's doing something fun, and I'm here in this stuffy church. So that was pretty much my exposure to Christianity and church and everything. However, a little later in life, I would say in my high school and early college years, I started having a question that was bothering me about, it's kind of the typical question you get at that age, which, what's the meaning of life? What is this all about? Right. And, I have memories on our freshman year in the dorm, everyone's sitting around in someone's dorm room talking about the meaning of life. And it seemed like everyone had a strong opinion of what it was. They just disagreed with each other. But if I was honest, all I could say is, I have no idea what this is about,
Mm-hmm.
And so, the summer after my freshman year of college, I moved home to make some money so that I could go skiing the next year and do the fun stuff I like to do during the year, some spending cash. So it's when I was living at my parents' home, and there was one night I just could not fall asleep. It's like, middle of the week, Wednesday night or something, and it's 1 a.m. and I just can't fall asleep. I have a job and I have to get up early the next morning. So, I finally just gave up and got out of bed, went upstairs, and was looking at through this big bookshelf my parents have in their house to try to find a book that would help me fall asleep. And so I'm just scanning and I see this black leather book called the Bible. And of course, what did I know about church and the Bible? Well, the only thing I knew is that it was really boring. So I thought, well, maybe that's a good book. I'm going to grab that and read it, and it's going to help me fall asleep. Not the most noble of motivations, but it does highlight a characteristic of God that we often forget, which is that he has a really good sense of humor.
He does. Oh, my goodness.
And so I took this book down into my bedroom. I laid on my bed, sat on my bed, and I just cracked it open to a random page in the middle, but I happened to open it up to the first page of the New Testament. And I remember reading the title page for the New Testament, and it said, the New Testament of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I read that title and I thought to myself, I have no idea what that means. Like New Testament, what's new about it? If I look at it, this stuff looks pretty old to me. It doesn't look new at all. So what's new? And so I turned the page to the next, page, which was the first chapter of the book of Matthew. I saw Matthew and I thought, who's Matthew? I have no idea who this dude is, but I just started reading.
Mm.
And of course, the beginning of Matthew starts with this guy begat that guy, begat this other guy, who begat these 12 sons, and on and on and on for almost a page. And I was thinking, man, this is even more boring than I thought it would be. But thankfully, I didn't give up. I waded through the genealogies, and very quickly after the genealogies, there was a statement real clear that said, this is about Jesus and who he is. And I was instantly intrigued.
Mm.
And I just started reading, and I probably read 5 or 6 chapters, maybe that night. And it's hard to explain in words what happened. I'll do the best I can, but it was somehow almost like God told me, but I didn't hear any words, which that alone was weird. Like, how can God tell me something, but I don't hear any weird words? Mm-hmm. So that was odd. But I sensed from God saying, Michael, I see this issue, this question you have about the meaning of life. Mm-hmm. And the answer to that question you will find in my son about whom you are reading right now. And I rolled over in my bed on my knees, and I thank God for showing me the meaning of life. And then I fell asleep. But as far as I know, that was the first time in my life I had ever prayed.
Wow.
And how did I even know to pray?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, that was during the summer. I think it was during August of that summer. So I kept reading the book Matthew for a couple more weeks, and then I had to go back to Boulder, right, to CU, to the University of Colorado. And I planned on living with my friend Steve Lowe. We became friends, and we're going to live together our sophomore year. So I get to our room, and I'm unpacking everything. And Steve shows up and puts his suitcases on the ground and says, Michael, I don't know if I'm going to live with you this year. And I said, well, why, Steve? What's up? Because we've been planning this the whole time and everything. And he says, last year you and I, we partied a lot. We got drunk a lot and wasted, and we lived quite a wild life. But I'm a Christian, and I didn't really live like a Christian last year. But over the summer, I've decided I'm not living like that anymore. Mm. And from my perspective, as soon as he said, I'm a Christian, I just ignored everything he was saying. He was kind of like the parents in the Snoopy. It's like, wah, 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 I'm just blah, blah, blah. I was just waiting for him to stop talking. But as soon as he stopped talking, I said, I'm a Christian too. And if you could see the look on his face, those were like the last words in the English language he was expecting to be coming out of my mouth in that moment.
Goodness, that's
right?
awesome.
And so, I'd been reading the Bible for that thing for about a month or so, and I only understood half of what I read, and I had all these questions. He grew up in a Christian family, and so he was Chinese American, went to Chinese American church in Pittsburgh, had all sorts of way more experience and knowledge than I did. So we sat down, and I just asked him question after question after question for like 2 hours. We talked.
Wow.
And then finally he said an interesting thing. He said, we should get involved in a Christian ministry here on campus. And I said, Steve, I don't think there are any Christian ministries. At least I've never seen any. Turns out there were a lot of Christian ministries. I just had no idea they were there, right? And so we got involved with one, and really quick, within a couple of weeks, I was being discipled by one of the older classmen. I was in a Bible study, studying the book of John in our whole dormitory area. I was going to a weekly meeting. I was going to trainings that were teaching me how to read the Bible, how to share my faith, how to be filled with the Holy Spirit.
Wow.
And I just I just experienced so much change that the first time I went home after that, which was for Thanksgiving, like in the time we are right now, was the first time I went back home after I left in the summer. And I was nervous because I was thinking, I'm a completely different person than left in August.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if my family's even going to recognize me. And that is what transformation looks like.
Yes.
That is transformation.
That's right. Oh.
And so in those college groups, I had just this solid trajectory of transformation for about 6 or 7 years. But as happens with these kind of college ministries, eventually people graduate, they get married, they move away. And this community it was a core about 200 people that was really tight. And I was very tight with 50 of those. And I was like brother and sister with about 10 or 15 of those.
Oh.
And that thing just started scattering. People started moving away, getting jobs, doing this. There were still some people in the area, but we didn't have that solid community where we're getting together every couple days. And it was just this continuous thing we did.
Yeah. Wow.
And simultaneously, these changes, constant change I saw in my life, I started seeing those changes become a lot more difficult. And I started encountering areas in my life that seemed almost stubborn, and resistant to the usual Christian things I did before that radically transformed me. But now all of a sudden I was finding resistance and didn't know what was going on. Is it my fault? Is I'm just a defective person or something? Or is it, maybe it's my church's fault. They're not doing what they need to be doing. But I had no answers. I didn't know what was going on. And that was the first of my questions about this second big area of my life, which was how do we change? How do people actually mature? How does character transform? And why don't we see more radical transformation in the churches that I've been involved in and around us, like we did see quite a bit in our college group?
Yeah.
And so that's really what led me into all of this stuff we're talking about.
Okay. And did you stay in that same area? You haven't moved away? Generally in Colorado, or?
I stayed in the same Boulder area because the profession that I studied had all sorts of work. It was a high-tech field, all sorts of work right in this area. So all the jobs I got were in this area. So I stayed.
Really?
But most people didn't.
Okay.
Some did, but most people didn't.
What was your work right out of college?
I was an electrical engineer with computer science. So I did software. I was a software guy, wrote software and high-tech stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Okay.
But now you're with Life Model Works. How did that come about? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, so I eventually ended up getting married too, and my wife and I and our kids, we started getting involved in a church in the area in our neighborhood in our area of Colorado, and this church just started growing like crazy. And they eventually asked me to become an elder, and I would keep in the elder meetings, I would keep bringing up the issue of, we're seeing all these people who would never go to a church, come to our church and come to meet Jesus. And, but what are we doing to help them grow and mature? So I'm kind of asking the same questions I'm asking about myself, about how we mature and that kind of thing. And I would do that over and over again. And finally, the pastors, there was a period in time I was working for a startup company that ran into some financial stuff and wasn't doing well. And the pastor said, well, why don't you quit your job and come on staff with us and try to figure out this thing you keep bringing up in the elder meetings about how we help people grow and become our discipleship pastor.
Oh, wow.
And so I came on staff and did that. And I just, even though I still had these questions, I just started doing stuff. Right. I wrote a book for brand new Christians called Basic Training for Walking with Jesus.
Okay.
And it kind of covers all the basics, real basics of becoming a Christian, because we had a lot of people in our church that had never gone to church ever. And so they would, come up to the pastor after the sermon and said, that was a great sermon, but what's the code thing of this thing where, like you'd said, under one of these kind of things in the Bible, it says COL.3:12. Is there like a key, decoder key for that? What's that mean? Like, so they didn't even know the books of the Bible, had never read the Bible. All they know is they were excited to know Jesus. And so I had a book that kind of just brought people up the basics of Christianity. Okay. And I also did a little more advanced thing, which was a bunch of spiritual practices based on Dallas Willard and other people. Okay. A 5-week training that I took over 800 people through on spiritual disciplines and things we do to help us change. And it was doing all these things I did where I kept running into the fact that they would work fabulously sometimes, and for some people and for other people or other occasions, they seemed not, the typical Christian things we did to grow seemed not to work at all.
Yeah.
And so I kept running into the word sometimes, which is, why do these things that we normally do to grow work sometimes and don't work other times? Well, the engineer in me says what that probably means is there's some variables in this equation of how we mature and grow that we don't have. We're leaving some variables out. We have some good variables because it works sometimes, but we obviously don't. There's missing pieces of this puzzle.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was the context. I got to the point where I would be in my office at the church just staring at my dry erase board, my blank dry erase board, almost wanting God to give me a picture or an outline or an image or something. Because I knew I didn't truly understand the whole equation. I didn't get a picture from God, but what I got was a phone call from a man who had visited our church and saw what I was doing, the discipleship stuff. And he called me and he said, "Can we have lunch? I want to talk about what you're doing because I saw what you're doing." So we sat down to lunch and he goes, Dallas Willards is a good personal friend of mine. Our families even take vacations together and things. One of the things Dallas would complain about, he'd always say to me, it seems like everybody's reading my books, but almost no churches are actually doing it. And then this man looked at me and he said, "But it seems like you're actually doing it." Which normally would be a compliment, right? But at that point, I was swimming in this questions about, why does it work sometimes? What does it not work other times? What are we missing? I'd say I had more questions than answers. Questions like, why did I sometimes see my non-Christian friends treating people better than some of my Christian friends that I knew?
Yes.
Not all of them. I'm not making a blanket statement, but why did I sometimes see that happen?
Yep.
And why did I sometimes see Christian leaders and leaders of Christian organizations act in ways that to me did not look like Jesus at all?
Yeah.
Like, why is that happening? And why don't we see more just radical, consistent, pervasive transformation of character in our churches, kind of like with Paul and Saul.
Yeah.
How did this essentially a sociopathic narcissist who was trying to murder as many Christians as possible become the man who wrote 1 Corinthians 13 on love?
Yeah.
I mean, that's transformation. Why don't we see more of that?
Yeah.
And so that's what led me into this whole thing. And this man reacted to me and says, "Well, Michael, why don't we, these are good questions. Why don't you and I start having lunch every month and start reading and listening to sermons and kind of digging into this and see if we can get some traction and some answers?" And so I pulled a friend of mine who's a pastor in, and we just started meeting every month. And it was, maybe a half a year into these monthly meetings where this man, Bob, he said a very, very interesting thing to me. He said, one of the areas of discipleship we're not looking at is neuroscience and the way the human brain works. And I'm like, "Bob, I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean neuroscience and discipleship?" And he goes, "Well, let me invite my friend, Dr. Jim Wilder, next month to our lunch together. And I think he can explain it for you."
Wow.
And so that following month we got together like we always had been, but there's this new stranger, Jim Wilder. He looks at me and he says, "Michael, what would you like out of this meeting?" And I said, "I'd like to know why we don't," I kind of basically just vomited these questions I just shared now to him. And so, why don't we see more pervasive, radical transformation, blah, blah, blah. And he said, "Michael, I think it would help you, if you want to have answers to these questions, it would help you to understand how God designed the human brain to mature us and to form our character." and he pulled a plastic brain out of his bag that he had brought.
Serious.
He disconnected the left and the right hand, and he started explaining how the brain processes our emotional and relational surrounding to form our character and to mature our relational skills so that we're more robust and resilient human beings and that we can love better. And It was that discussion where I thought, when I was in that discussion, by the time I'd been a Christian 35 years, I'd been a missionary, overseas. I'd gone to seminary. I'd been an elder for 10 years, a pastor, and no one had ever mentioned anything like that about how God actually designed the brain to be what the role that, opened our eyes to how we mature and how we grow, how we transform.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like a turning point, a point of inflection in my life.
Wow.
And Jim and Kitty Wilder basically opened up their lives and their family to us, to my wife and me. And they just started inviting us to everything they did. And we just jumped into the deep end of the pool on this stuff.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's how I got involved.
That's amazing. I love it. I love it. Well, let's talk about that. Like, yeah. I mean, how are we formed? Like, what's important to know in terms of how God designed our brain?
Yeah.
And how does that shape? Because, I mean, one of the assumptions we're making right now is that some things need to change in probably a lot of churches in terms of how they're addressing formation. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think most pastors I talk to, no one's generally arguing against that very much anymore. They all realize something's wrong. So,
yeah, thankfully, yeah.
Yeah, thankfully, yeah. But like, yeah. What did you learn? I mean,
so what I learned from Jim is, that we have two hemispheres in our brain that focus on two aspects. They're both meant to work together, but it's almost like we have two brains. And a right brain is really our social and emotional brain. It's asking questions about who are we attached to and who's giving us a model of how life is lived. And it's also asking things like who gets me and cares about what's going inside me, who can read what's going on inside of me without any words being exchanged. And my identity, who am I? Who am I uniquely created by God to be? Mm-hmm. And how is it like me to act uniquely like Michael Hendricks? Mm-hmm. And also identity has another aspect, which is a we. Who are we as a group, as a family, as a community, and what is it like us to act? And he said that's the brain. That brain is very, very fast. It's 12 times a second. It's processing all these questions. They're all relational and emotional questions. Yes. Our left brain is trying to put words to it, and is more about what we think of as the brain is solving the problems we need to solve, and also believing the right things and making the right choices.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then Jim said a phrase that I'll never forget as long as I live. And he says, one of the reasons we don't see more transformation in the church is because churches have largely focused on training the left brain while leaving the right brain largely ignored and untrained. And the formation of character is primarily a right brain task. It needs both hemispheres, but it's a primarily right brain task. And that's the part of the brain and our discipleship that we're ignoring. And to me, that was like a mic drop thing. It was like,
huge.
I was like, whoa.
Yes, huge.
Yeah, I didn't know what that meant, but I could tell it was big. Right?
Yes.
And so my question is, well, what's an example? I don't know, Jim, if I'm understanding everything you're saying here, but what's an example of a Christian practice that trains our right brain, just like you say, we're training our left brains fairly well in the church. Well, what's an example of a right brain trainable thing we can do? I don't understand. And he said, well, the brain really desires one thing more than any other thing. It's like one of the first thing your brain looks to. If you show up at a new place at a party or a new place that you've never been to, or when you go to something, your brain is scanning for the one thing first. It scans for other things as well, but this is the first thing it's looking for. Even when you're born, it's the first thing. And that is joy. And joy is defined as what I feel in my body, what I experience corporally in my body when I can tell that you are happy to be with me. And it's largely nonverbal. It's not through words that I know this. It's by your eyes and your face lighting up on me, your eyes sparkling, and the tone of your voice, not the words actually so much, but the tone of your voice. And he said, joy works primarily it's like the relational and emotional fuel that helps us do the hard work of learning how to love each other well. Right? When we think about it, you look at scripture, love is the central task. Really, love is the central task and goal of Christian discipleship.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Love is the thing that, multiple times and multiple people in the New Testament say that love is what every command is boiled down to underneath. It's all some form of loving each other. So the goal of Christian discipleship is that we become a people who love like Jesus loves.
Yeah.
Right? Love and joy is the fuel that helps. It's the starting thing, and it's the first step that helps us love well. So one of the first things new Christians need, and whoever needs it, anybody who wants to change, is to start building their joy and filling up their joy tank. Meaning that we're around people whose faces are lighting up when they see us. And it's obviously they're communicating to us non-verbally that I'm special. Yeah. It's really the sense that I'm special to you. You're glad to be with me. Yeah, you matter. You care about me, and that we're connected in life.
Yeah, I mean, it's what a baby's looking for from their parents from early on.
It is the thing, actually, not just that the baby's looking for. It's the thing that causes the baby's brain to organize itself and start to fill in. You know, baby's born with a very little part of their brain formed, and the rest of it's unorganized.
Yeah.
And interactions of joy and rest with mom are the very things that actually starts to organize the baby's brain into a human being as it matures.
Oh, man.
And so I had never heard about the importance of joy, and I never knew it had any relation really to discipleship in my life. And so for me, this was groundbreaking.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
And so I started thinking of some of these trainings I did, you know, let's say the training I did for 5 weeks in spiritual disciplines, and we'd do it around tables, 8 people around tables, and we'd have like 40 people in the room or something at a time. And like one person would say, Michael, this training just radically changed my life. I had one man tell me, I think this training actually saved my marriage. You know, I didn't really design it to save a marriage, but it did. And in the same table, another person would come up to me and say, you know, Michael, none of this ever just doesn't seem to work for me. But now I just got a new variable. Like if one person comes into my training and their joy is pretty high, meaning the people around them are happy to be with them. They have a good network of friends that are affirming that they're special to each other. And another person comes into my training who's kind of all alone. Maybe they moved from the East Coast and they have a job here, but they don't have very many friends. So you have one full joy tank and one empty joy tank. And no wonder it doesn't work for one person. It does for the other, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's like if you bought a new car and the gas tank is absolutely empty. It could be the nicest car. It could be a Lexus. But how useful is that car to you if its gas tank is empty?
Yeah.
Well, what's the first thing you need to do?
Fill that thing up.
Fill up the gap. Fill up the gas tank.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Wow. So joy, I know there's more that you learned from him, but that was a pretty...
Much more.
That was a pretty significant discovery.
Yep.
And it's interesting that Jesus begins the Sermon on the Mount with "Blessed are those," and just keeps. I mean, he keeps saying it. You know, like, and we know that's another way to say this, like, glad or full of joy are those who, and then fill in the blank what he says next each time. So clearly, he starts there. Pretty important to Jesus.
Yep. Yeah. Even and when you think of, I think it's Deuteronomy 6, where it's one of the only times that God gives a prayer to Moses and Aaron. So God actually wrote the prayer, gave it to Aaron to pray, and it's may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may His face shine upon you. I read that after learning the brain science. I read that for the first time after, and I thought that is the definition that Dr. Alan Shore discovered through brain scans at UCLA, who actually radically changed the understanding of the brain, that the brain is primarily looking for joy. But that's his definition of joy, and I'm reading it. In Deuteronomy 6 that was written 3,000 something years before.
Yes.
I mean, that's just mind-blowing. Of course, God knows it. He's the author of the brain, just like he's
That's right.
He's the spirit behind the authors of Scripture.
That's right. That's right.
So,
oh, man.
I started finding joy everywhere now that I knew to look for it.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Once you discover something, it's like archaeology. Like you dig it up and you're like, oh, it's everywhere. I see it all over the place.
Right. Or fly fishing. You know, I'll be fly fishing at this river. I won't see any fish, and all of a sudden I'll see one. And once I see one, then I see 12.
Yeah.
Right. Because now I know what they look like and how to see them. Yeah, I have new eyes. Right.
Yes. Oh, man. So how is that shaped then how you are, you're helping churches think through now how to create culture of joy, or opportunities to express that to one another. Like, give us some examples of some things you're doing that are shaping and forming the way churches are going after that part of the brain.
Yep.
In their formation.
Yeah. So what I do at Life Model Works, where I work, is I work with churches doing this very thing. A lot of them have read our book, The Other Half of Church, and they call us up or they email me and say, we love this book. We want this in our church, but we have no idea where to start. Can you help us? And then I train them in it.
Okay.
And I start meeting with them, like with them and their leadership team or whatever team they get together. We'll start meeting like twice a month for a year. And so one of the meetings, I'll give some of the theory behind it, but then I'll teach them a practice, and then they'll practice it for 2 weeks between meetings. Then we'll come back and unpack it, and I'll teach them another practice. But everything I teach them is a relational, emotional skill that has one main goal in mind, and that's to become a fearless people who love like Jesus loves. So everything I train is some form of helping people love better.
Okay.
Now, sometimes we have to tackle big emotions and how we handle big emotions, because usually when we're stuck in negative emotions, that's when our love falls apart. And we get stuck in fear. Even churches sometimes promote fear. There's somewhere along the line in churches, and in Christianity, it became about performance, doing a good job, making the right decisions, and doing the right things. And people who pointed out that this was not working would usually very quickly be ostracized or removed entirely.
Yeah.
But this is actually a fear-motivated view of Christianity, where we're just trying to do the right thing and make the right choices instead of, the big alternative to that, which sounds familiar, but it uses a very different part of the brain, much, much, much stronger, which is the attachment part of the brain. It's instead of asking the question, who are we and what's it like us to act in this world? That may seem like very similar questions, but they're very, very different in the way the brain looks at them. When you start saying what's the right decision to make and how do I do the right things, that's really coming from the wrong place of the brain as far as character transformation. And so, we did a training in my basement led by Jim Wilder for 14 weeks, and he started using this thing called group identity. And we started repeating group identity to each other of what kind of people we are that helps us love better. Like, we are a people, one of the ones I like the best is we are people who are constantly looking for what God is growing in others. So what that means is I'm constantly looking at you, and if I see a little bit of gold shine through, I'm going to tell you about it.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw something unique, I think, that God put in you, Jeff, but I think it's shining through, and I would love to even see more of that. And it was really a privilege to see. The interesting thing about our identity and who we are, we can't see our own identity. God actually wired our brain. There's this misunderstanding, if I just go up into the mountains of Colorado and sit Indian style in nature, over time I can find out who I am. But that's actually exactly the wrong thing to do, because the identity circuits are accessed through mirror neurons. Mirror neurons mean they come through our eyes and they're looking for it reflected in others. And so you have no idea who you are without the help of the people around you. Right? Our churches are really meant to be a place where we're constantly reflecting who we are to each other, both our group identity that we all share and our individual unique identities, that I see something very different in you than I see in me, but it's incredibly beautiful. Even though I don't have it, God made me differently. And I tell you, and you tell me a very different thing you see shining in me. And there's some group identity that we're the same, because we share this as members of a family, essentially.
Yes.
And so one of the biggest challenges of churches I work with and churches in our country is that most of them work and function as religious organizations. And religious organizations are essentially organized around trying to get good Christian stuff done. And but when you look at the design of the brain and the way Jesus talks about church is really meant to function like a family.
Yes.
And families bond with each other deeply and tell each other who we are and what it's like us to act as members of God's family.
Yes.
So my definition of discipleship is that evangelism and discipleship have actually changed as a result.
I bet they have. Yeah.
So for me, evangelism is your introduction into the family of God, becoming a member of the family of God, and forming an attachment with God and his people.
Yes.
And discipleship is learning how to live as a member of God's family.
I love it.
Because most of us, the families we grew up in, lived in a very, very different, and the people we bonded with and later in life live in a very, very different way than the way God's family works. And so discipleship is just teaching us how to live in God's family on earth.
I love it.
On this messy earth. So it's all very family oriented, which is near and dear to your heart, because that means attachment. Family means attachment.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, one of the things that we do is we'll help a church redesign their whole disciple-making pathway using familial language.
Yep.
Like, what do you do with an infant? What do you do with a child? What do you do with a young? Like, that's what the formational process is. It's just helping people grow up into spiritual maturity, just like you would raising a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the interesting things about maturity, Toe, is what you need in your life to become mature is you need some people in your community who are obviously farther down the road than you are.
Yeah.
Not perfect. Jesus is perfect. He's the one farther down the road that blows all of our minds. Yeah. But you need a couple men and you need a couple women too. Mm-hmm. Further down the road than you are. And you actually see them, you're attached to the point where you do life together and you see how they treat each other. They see how they handle an insult. You see how they handle when their car breaks on the interstate during rush hour traffic. Big things and small things.
Yes.
And then we need a peer group who are all kind of working. We're all around the same, area of maturity, and we're helping each other, iron sharpening iron. It's kind of like Swiss cheese that all of our maturity has a bunch of holes in it. But the saving grace, like for you and me, Jeff, is your holes are in the different place in your Swiss cheese than mine. So we can kind of fill in each other's holes.
Yeah.
By the things I learned how to you growing up, and you didn't learn that, but you learned this other thing that you can teach me that I didn't learn.
Yeah.
And then the third thing we need is some people down below us that aren't as far that we can start to pass on what we've been learning from our peer group and from these more mature people, passing on to younger people and bring them up and share these blessings.
That's awesome. I love it. And, Paul uses the language of family. And
all over the place.
It's everywhere. Yeah. It's everywhere. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as you think about that, what are some of the challenges you find then as you're starting to work with churches? What are the obstacles? What are some of the things that make it, that you've got to address? I mean, some we've already talked a little bit about, but I'd love to unpack it a little bit more directly.
Yeah, a big one is it's fairly easy to raise joy in a church. That's an easy one. Most churches jump right in and start raising joy.
Okay.
There's good practices of quiet as well, because we need a good balance of joy and quiet. You don't want all joy because you get tired after a while with joy, even though it's a good thing. It's like eating your favorite dessert every day. You don't want to eat it every day. You want to eat it just infrequently enough that it stays special. It's kind of like joy and quiet. We need a lot of joy, and then we need some quiet, and then we need more joy, and then we need some rest. So our churches need to give us places to build joy, have our faces shine at each other, and also realize that sometimes people don't need joy. They need kind of some quiet, or they may need to even have some space and be left alone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in our services, we need high energy times and lower energy times as well. So people catch their breath and then build joy again, and then catch your breath and build joy. Those ones can spread pretty easy. The hardest thing to spread is to get a church functioning like a family. That is a complete, almost redesign. It is a paradigm shift, I would say.
Yes, it is.
And so that's the biggest challenge is, the churches, their whole structure is all set up on the organizational model. And then you start talking about functioning as a family, and they're like deer in the headlights.
Yes.
And we're right at the beginning of the wave of getting this into churches. It's just been for the last couple of years that churches have been open. Through the book I wrote and the other book Jim wrote, the Renovated, those two books really are the first time we've seen a lot of interest in the life model and this kind of discipleship, transformational discipleship. But we're right on the front edge of the wave, and it remains to be seen how we do this. Mm-hmm. But what we sense from God is just go do this with as many churches as you can. Make them be safe places where you can stumble along and try and fail and come back and go, man, that really blew up, and have people go, good job. We're so thankful you tried it. Man, did that blow up. Okay, what else can we try? Well, let's try it this way now. Yeah. As long as you can stay out of that fear-based success failure mode, you'll never get anything done if you're in the success failure mode. Like, Michael, that failed. You obviously don't know what you're doing. You're fired. We're going to get a better person. You're never going to get this learned because it's going to take a bunch of failure to be able to learn how to do this. No, we haven't been doing this in our country, at least, for a long time.
For a long time, yeah.
Yeah.
If ever. Maybe.
Yep. There's some churches that are.
Yes, there are, for sure.
They're very few. They're very few and far between. And when those churches get successful and start growing, they lose it.
Yes.
How do you grow and keep it? I don't know. God has told us we're going to figure that out, but we're not going to figure it out as a person. We're going to figure it out as a learning community of all the people we train and are trying to do this. And we're just going to share what we're learning. I think that's how it's going to happen.
I don't know if this is the answer, but I'll offer a suggestion. If we keep thinking about family as a good model, the way families grow is they multiply and start new families. So there's always enough parents for the kids. Mm-hmm. And there's grandparents and great grandparents. And I think a lot of our churches don't know how to multiply new families. We just try to keep them all under one big roof.
Yep.
And they feel more like an orphanage instead of a household. And so I just wonder if the multiplication piece, just like my kids are almost all out of the home now. Our oldest probably will be married in a year or two. We anticipate, she's going to get to start her own family. Now she still comes home and we still hang out, but we raised her to be an adult so she can have her own family if the Lord wants to give her children. So.
Yeah, that's one of the obstacles is that a lot of our church keep people in kindergarten.
They do. Yes.
So no wonder there are no more families spawning because people aren't growing up.
Exactly. Yes.
And so one of the things we have in the life model from the brain science and the Bible both is a very specific maturity assessment for each of the maturity stages. And we even have people go back into their infant level maturity and assess the skills they received, which is basically means you have these because you received it from your mother and your father. If you don't have it, it's because they didn't have it to give you.
Yes.
So it's not even your fault. The child level maturity, infant is really 1 to about age 3 or 0 to age 3-ish.
Right.
Infant is like 3 or 4 until we hit puberty. I mean, child is 3 or 4 until we hit puberty. In child, our brain rewires to actually learn how to take care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. That's the main thing a child is meant to learn. How to do hard things, to know what truly satisfies, right? Eating all of your Halloween candy the night of Halloween, you realize that looks good on the surface, but later you go, wow, that was a really bad decision. That's a little one, but that is the root of addictions.
Yes.
Not learning what truly satisfies and it's really good to have 3 or 4 pieces of candy and then save it for the next night and kind of space it out and then throw out the candy when I'm sick of it, that kind of a thing. But there's a lot of people that get to the adult stage of life and even beyond that who have never learned how to do that.
Yes.
How to calm their appetites, to tame their cravings, how to do hard things they don't want to do, things that are even difficult and painful. Yeah. Very, very important. And, that's what by the age 12, our kids should be pretty good at doing that. In our churches, our goal is to get everybody working as adult level maturity who have have passed the adult level. And so we need to aim our discipleship at adult level maturity, which means you need to fill in your infant skills you didn't get from your parents and your child skills you didn't get taught from your parents. And then you need to work on your current adult skills. And the main adult skill that everything falls under is learning how to take care of myself and you at the same time without dropping either.
Wow, that's good.
That meaning I don't ignore myself in order to serve others so that my health fails, which is a lot of pastors do that.
Absolutely.
They throw their families into the dumpster in order to keep this thing going in the church, which is such an unwise.
Yes.
Or it's the other way around. All I take care of is myself and I don't really care about anybody.
Yeah.
So this is more like the narcissistic pastor where they're just trying to, accelerate their greatness and they'll just get rid of people if they don't approve of them and it's all me, but I don't really care about you. But an adult doesn't do either of these. It's not codependent and it's not narcissistic.
Right.
An adult knows how to take care of multiple important things without dropping any of them and can also make the hard decisions. There's some hard decisions where there's no good solution.
Yeah.
And so in those cases, adult knows how to make the least damaging decision from the options available.
Okay.
Right? But at the same time, that adult brain is thinking, how do I do the best for everyone, even though this is a really, really horrible situation, right?
Yes.
So that really puts you on the path to loving like Jesus loves. When you look at the way Jesus loves, he was juggling multiple incredibly important things without dropping any of them.
Yeah.
He was not dismissing anyone, and he didn't ruin his own health either.
Yes.
He's taking care of himself. He would disappear. His disciples were like, where did he go? We woke up and he's gone. And they were like annoyed. If I'm reading scripture right, I think they were annoyed with him. It's like, Jesus, you're just disappearing on us.
Yeah.
Well, he would go take care of himself when he needed it.
That's right.
And then there were other times he would bear deep burdens of other people because he knew these people are on the edge. I need to sustain them.
Oh, man.
Right? He was really, really good at this.
Oh, gosh. And he could say at the end, I've done everything you asked me to do, and I didn't lose anyone you gave me to, except for the one that we knew was going to be lost.
Right. Exactly.
It's like, okay, he did it. He
really
is
our hero. When it comes to loving like Jesus loves, of course, Jesus is the hero.
Yes. Oh man. So when you go to a church, are you like helping them assess where people are at in their maturity?
Eventually, we don't
Yeah.
start with maturity.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
start building joy and quiet skills, learning when our brain's shutting off, and learning how to have an interactive relationship with Jesus.
Okay.
That's kind of the foundation of everything.
Yep.
We work on that. That'll take us a couple months.
Yeah.
And once they get fairly proficient in that, building joy means they're actually getting stronger and stronger. They have more resilience. Then we dive into the maturity skills and start assessing. If you jump straight into the maturity skills and people haven't built joy, it can kind of be too overwhelming and confusing.
Okay. Well,
so I learned there's important order in this.
That's wisdom.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really good. Yeah, that's one I need to learn to step into better, because I think that creates the security, right, for you to be able to have harder conversations, to talk openly about what's really going on. If you don't have that, you probably aren't going to be able to handle it.
Right, and people need to learn to crawl first and then walk and then run.
Yeah.
Right. If you tell people to run and they don't know how to do rocking or crawling, it's just going to feel like hopeless despair, and they'll give up and they won't show up for the next session. So you have to do it in a way where you're not leaving people behind, but that you're moving quickly enough too that people are staying challenged and interested.
Yeah.
You're kind of a balance there. You need an adult brain to be able to do this, to lead this training, because you got to juggle a lot of things.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, man. I'm really thankful that you guys are doing this.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. It's hard, but oh man, I can't believe I get to do this.
What a joy.
Yeah, it is a joy. I have to pinch myself.
Man. Huh. So if people want to find out more about what you're doing or get connected to what your team's all about, where would they go?
Well, you can go to lifemodelworks.org and kind of we're redoing our website because it's not very good. So you'll have to peck around in our old website and find the consulting. And there's a little form you can fill out about church consulting. It'll send me an email.
Okay, good.
Or you can just send me an email directly at michaelhendricks@lifemodelworks.org. But of course, Michael is spelled Michel.
Yeah, I had to ask you at the beginning, is it Michael or did I say Michel?
Yeah. Or really, the easiest thing to do too is pick up a copy of The Other Half of Church and read it.
Please do that.
If you're at the end of that and you are interested, then get a hold of me.
Absolutely. I was going to say, if you haven't read that, you need to pick that up. I think it's a very important read for this moment in time in our church. I recommend it highly. Recommended Renovated as well. Jim, you referenced, and just what a gift he has been as well.
Yep.
Yeah, Michael, I'm really thankful for you and the work you're doing.
Thank you, Jeff.
I mean, my big hope was that we would just get to expose more people to your work. That was really why I wanted you on this podcast, because man, you would be helpful already. It's been super helpful, even for me. I'm sitting there going like, gosh, I got a bunch of notes in my head right now.
Yeah.
But more than anything, I want more of the church to realize this stuff is so important for the formation of souls. So,
it is it's the passion, it's the purpose of the church, and it's the thing we've kind of left to the side. So let's get after it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for being with us. And like I said, I recommend people read your book. And if, like you said, if at the end you want to take steps forward, contact you.
Reach out to us.
If they don't want to, then they won't get the help they need.
Right, exactly. They're not ready. It's not time.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you for inviting me.
Wow, I have so much that I'm thinking about now after listening to this conversation, just thinking through all the ways I still want to grow and how I create cultures of joy, how we rightly meet people where they're at in their spiritual maturity, not pushing them too fast. Just a whole lot. I told Michael that I know I'm going to probably want more conversations in the future, just because I have a sense that there's so much more for me to learn. And I hope that you learned a lot as well. Hey, we're just glad that you joined us. I hope this served you well. Like I said, I recommend you pick up his book. I think they're doing wonderful work, and I would love to just encourage you toward them. Also, we're creating more and more resources that are capturing similar kinds of ideas. Certainly, they've got stuff that we got to learn from and apply and develop, but we also have some stuff that we've been providing as well that I think could be really helpful. So please check out our resources at saturatetheworld.com. If you're new, we provide basically a monthly subscription where you can pay a monthly fee and get access to all of our resources. And we're trying to add more on a regular basis. So hopefully there'll be even more around some of the content we've been talking about recently around attachment-based disciple making. So would love to invite you to that. You can just go to saturatetheworld.com and look at the resources, and it'll show you how to subscribe. You can even start with a 5-day free trial just if you want to see what it's like. Also, we need partners. The work we do, we know is not going to be done well unless people are praying, not only us, but others for us. So if you want to be a prayer partner, send an email to hello@saturatetheworld.com. It's hello@saturatetheworld.com. Let them know you want to be a prayer partner. And that comes right from my phone. I send a text out once or twice a month to let you know what we're doing, what prayer we need, and then answers to the prayers that you've been praying, and how God has been just so faithful to support the work through us all together going to Him and asking for God's help. And then also we need financial supporters too. The work we do, a large portion of it is because of people funding the work we do, so we can make as much as possible available to people who can't afford it. We work all over the world. We're in Japan, Europe, Eastern and Western. We do some work in Mexico, Central America, a variety of places. Not everybody can necessarily afford to get the kind of training and coaching that they need, and we want to make sure everybody can get it if they need it. So that's based upon people supporting us. So would you become a financial partner with us? If you would like to do that, you can go to saturatetheworld.com, and there's a tab for giving. And whether it's a one-time gift or a monthly gift, we just appreciate anything you can do to support the work that we're doing. We need you, and we hope that you're also being blessed as you receive from us. Again, thanks for being with us. Let's all grow together in the practice of joy, of caring for each other's souls, of developing whole brain disciples for the glory of Jesus and our joy.